There's a knock at the door. She answers it. And in half a second, 3 masked figures are through the doorframe, guns raised, voices screaming over each other. She doesn't even have time to scream back. Hands grab her. A blindfold goes over her eyes, rope around her wrists. The last thing she feels before the trunk slams shut is the cold metal floor under her back. She's 19 years old, and her life just ended. So how does a rich teenage girl become the most wanted woman in America? Her name is Patricia. In 1974, she's a 19-year-old college student in California, quiet, wealthy, unremarkable in the way that rich kids often are. But by the end of this story, she's robbing banks with a machine gun, she's on the FBI's most wanted list, and she's at the center of one of the strangest criminal cases in American history. Kidnapped by a group who called themselves revolutionaries, locked in a closet for weeks, and somewhere along the way, something changes in her. Was she a victim the whole time, or did she become one of them? Stick around, because this one gets stranger the deeper you go. Before we get into it, if you're new here, this channel covers real cases just like this one every single week. Hit subscribe now, because trust me, you don't want to miss where this story goes. Okay, let's rewind to the beginning. Patricia grew up about as far from revolutionary as you can get. Her family was old American money. Her father ran one of the largest newspaper empires in the country, the kind of media dynasty that decided what millions of people read about the world every morning. That name alone opened doors. Private schools, family estates, the kind of wealth where you don't ask the price of anything. By 1974, Patricia was 19 and living a normal enough college life in California, going to class, seeing her boyfriend, doing what 19-year-olds do. She wasn't famous, she wasn't political, she was just a rich kid keeping a low profile, which is exactly what made her the perfect target. Because a few miles away, a small group of self-styled revolutionaries were watching. They called themselves the SLA, a Marxist group that saw themselves as modern-day Robin Hoods, fighting on behalf of the poor against a system rigged by the wealthy and the powerful. And in their eyes, nothing represented that rigged system better than a media mogul's daughter. If you wanted a symbol, a living, breathing statement about class and power in America, you couldn't script a better target than Patricia. So that's exactly what they did. On a February night in 1974, 3 masked figures broke down her apartment door. Patricia's boyfriend was struck and restrained. She was dragged out, blindfolded, tied up, and shoved into the trunk of a car. Within minutes, they were speeding away, leaving behind a ransacked apartment and a boyfriend with no idea where they'd taken her. They drove her to a safe house, and there, they did something that would define the next several weeks of her life. They opened a closet door barely wide enough to sit down in, and put her inside. No windows. No light most of the time. Just enough space to sit or lie curled up, listening to voices on the other side of the door, deciding what happens to her next. For a 19-year-old who days earlier was worrying about class schedules and weekend plans, this was a different universe entirely, and the country was about to find out about it. Real quick before we get into what happens next, drop a comment and let me know. Where are you watching this from? What time is it there right now? I read every single one, so let me know. Then, let's keep going, because this is where it gets bigger. Word of the kidnapping spread fast. Within days, it was the biggest story in the country. A wealthy media family's daughter, snatched in the night by an armed group nobody had heard of. Every newsroom in America wanted answers. They got them, eventually. A few days after the kidnapping, the SLA sent a letter to a local radio station with instructions to read it on air. The message was blunt. They had her, and they weren't giving her back for free. Then came the audio tape, a recording of Patricia's own voice, sent to her parents, shaky, exhausted, telling them she was alive. She mentioned scrapes that had been cleaned up, a cold she'd caught, medication they'd given her. It was proof of life. It was also, unmistakably, terrifying to hear. But the SLA wasn't just proving she was alive, they had demands. And the demand was almost absurd in scale. Before any negotiation for her release could even begin, Patricia's father needed to show good faith in the form of a massive food distribution program for California's poor and unemployed. They wanted $70 worth of groceries for every single needy person in the entire state. Do the math on that, adjusted to today's dollars, and you're looking at roughly $500 per person. Multiply that across California's population in need, and the total bill came out to somewhere around $400 million. Patricia's father did not have $400 million sitting around for a ransom grocery bill. What he offered instead was $2 million distributed specifically to the Bay Area where his daughter had been taken. So they did it. Trucks rolled out, food got distributed, and it did not go smoothly. The chaos of thousands of desperate people converging on food giveaways nearly turned into riots in multiple locations. And after all of that, the SLA didn't release her. Meanwhile, behind the doors of that safe house, something else was happening. Something slower and in some ways more disturbing than the kidnapping itself. They started letting her out of the closet. A little more each day. They talked to her. They gave her their writings, manifestos on class war, racism, gender, revolution, and made her read them, discuss them, absorb them. And somewhere in those weeks, something shifted. Because here's the uncomfortable truth about the SLA's ideology. Buried in the extremism, some of it wasn't crazy. Anti-racism, women's liberation, wealth redistribution to people who had nothing. To a 19-year-old raised inside enormous privilege, suddenly hearing in detail about the other side of the system she'd benefited from her whole life, some of it landed. About a month into her captivity, the SLA made her an offer nobody expected. She could go home. They didn't need her anymore. They'd made their statement. Patricia said no. She didn't just decline to leave. She chose to stay and fight alongside the people who had kidnapped her. And she was angry, specifically at her own father, who she now believed had deliberately lowballed the food demand and let people go hungry to save his own money. She recorded a new message. This time there was no shake in her voice, no talk of colds or scrapes. She told her father flatly that his half-effort at the food distribution had made it painfully clear where his priorities were. And she gave herself a new name, one that had nothing to do with the family she'd been born into. Whoever answered that door a month earlier didn't exist anymore. She had the chance to walk out that door and go home. She chose to stay, and what she does next is going to shock you even more than the kidnapping did. If you're finding this one wild already, drop a comment right now. Would you have gone back to your old life, or stayed? Let's keep going. 2 weeks later, the group planned a bank robbery, and Patricia didn't stay behind. She went with them. Security cameras rolling, the group stormed in, weapons up, screaming orders demanding money into bags. And on that footage, Patricia isn't cowering in a corner or being shoved along by her captors. She's moving with purpose. She's yelling commands at customers to get down and stay down. To anyone watching that tape, there was no visible difference between her and the rest of the group. They walked out with over $10,000 and vanished into the streets before police arrived. When that security footage hit the news, the entire country did a double take. This wasn't a hostage anymore. This was the missing heiress, seemingly by choice, robbing a bank in broad daylight. There's a photograph from around this time, Patricia standing in front of an SLA flag, weapon in hand, looking every bit the committed revolutionary the group claimed she'd become. The FBI had officially had enough. They added every member of the SLA to the most wanted list. Patricia's face, the same face that had been on missing person flyers weeks earlier, was now on a wanted poster. That photo, heiress turned gunwoman, standing proud in front of a revolutionary flag, is the single image that convinced most of America she wasn't a hostage anymore. But the real chaos hadn't even started yet. With their faces plastered across every news broadcast in the country, the SLA knew the Bay Area wasn't safe anymore. They packed up and relocated the entire operation south to Los Angeles. That's where everything fell apart. One afternoon, a handful of SLA members went into a sporting goods store, not for a heist this time, just petty shoplifting. Waiting in the van. Inside, employees caught the group in the act and confronted them. What should have been a minor scuffle turned into a full sprint out the front doors, staff chasing after them into the parking lot. Patricia saw what was happening from the van. She grabbed a weapon, leaned out the window, and opened fire toward the building, not aimed to kill, but enough to make the employees back off and let her people get back to the vehicle. They peeled out and got away. But the damage was done. That chaotic scene in a parking lot in broad daylight was enough for witnesses to identify the van. And once police had the van, they had a trail. That trail led straight to the SLA's new safe house. The next morning, that house was surrounded. Police gave the order, "Come out, hands up." The SLA's answer was gunfire. What followed was nearly an hour of one of the most intense shootouts in American law enforcement history. SLA members firing from inside the house, dozens of officers returning fire from every angle outside. And because this was now the biggest story in the country, news crews were already on scene. Millions of Americans watched this unfold live, in real time, on their television screens. Eventually, police made a decision. They fired tear gas canisters through the windows. You can see the footage, smoke and gas pouring out, the house disappearing into a haze, and then the house caught fire. Whether from the gas canisters, gunfire, or something else entirely, flames tore through the building fast. The shootout that had raged for nearly an hour ended in an inferno, broadcast live to the entire country. When it was finally over, several SLA members were dead, some from gunfire, some from the fire itself. Patricia was not among them. She wasn't in the house at all. While her fellow SLA members were dying on live television, she was 30 minutes away in a hotel room with a couple of others, watching the same broadcast everyone else in America was watching, and realizing that everyone she'd been living alongside for the past several months had just been killed. There was only one thing left to do: run. She wasn't even there when it happened, which means somewhere out there, the country's most wanted woman was still free, still hiding, still running. So the real question becomes, how long can someone stay hidden when their face is on every wanted poster in America? For the next 16 months, Patricia disappeared. No sightings, no confirmed leads, nothing but a face on wanted posters and a country that couldn't stop talking about her. Was she dead? Hiding overseas? Still radicalized and plotting more attacks? Nobody knew. Then, more than a year later, the FBI finally caught a break, tracking remaining SLA associates to an apartment in San Francisco. They moved in, and this time there was no shootout, no standoff. Patricia was arrested without incident. Her mugshot from that day says everything you need to know about where her head was at. She's not crying, not pleading innocence. She's smiling, fist raised in the same revolutionary salute the SLA had been photographed making for over a year. When booking officers asked for her occupation, she reportedly gave an answer that had nothing to do with college or her old life at all. She identified as a revolutionary, fully committed to the cause. By every outward appearance, she was still one of them. On the stand, Patricia's defense was that everything, the bank robbery, the shootout preparation, the radicalized recordings, was all the product of coercion. Weeks locked in a closet, threats, isolation. What she now described as a calculated process to break her down and rebuild her as someone else entirely. In other words, brainwashing. Was she telling the truth? Was the confident, gun-wielding woman on that bank footage a performance under duress, or had those weeks in captivity genuinely changed who she was? It's a question people still debate to this day. Psychologists, legal scholars, true crime fans. Even now, there's no clean answer. The jury, for their part, didn't buy the defense. Patricia was convicted of bank robbery and related charges and sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. But her story didn't end in a cell. About 2 years into her sentence, President Jimmy Carter made the decision to commute it, cutting her time dramatically short. In total, Patricia spent less than 2 years behind bars for a saga that had dominated the country's attention for well over a year. There's a photo of her from that day, holding up her official order of clemency, free, finally, after one of the strangest journeys an ordinary American teenager has ever taken. So who was she really? A terrified 19-year-old, kidnapped off the street, and psychologically broken down until she had no choice but to comply? Or someone who, given a look at a different set of beliefs, genuinely chose a new identity and meant every second of it, right up until the moment it all came crashing down in flames? The jury made their decision. The president made his. But even decades later, this case still gets debated in psychology classrooms, true crime forums, and law school lectures, because it sits right in that uncomfortable gray area between victim and willing participant. Maybe there isn't a clean answer. Maybe both things can be true at once. I'm just the storyteller here. I'll let you be the judge. So what do you think? Brainwashed or a believer? Drop your verdict in the comments. I genuinely want to know where you land on this one. And if you want more stories like this, the ones that make you question everything you thought you knew, hit subscribe, because there's a lot more where this came from.